Tonight on Christian Newsmakers, a story of survival, adoption, and redemption. Camey Joy is our guest tonight here on WTHR Plus. Camey, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me tonight. It is an honor.
So, Camey, let's start with your birth. You were born in the mountains of Guatemala, and it's there that your challenges begin in life. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, I was born in the mountains of Guatemala, and I was born with a severe bilateral cleft lip and cleft palate. That is where you are born without a lip, and in the roof of your mouth you had a hole. I had a hole, and because of this I was unable to eat, I was unable to nurse, and my parents tried desperately for 3 days to keep me alive. They would take breast milk and dip it into a rag and try to squeeze it into my little mouth. But I wasn't going to be able to survive.
So what ends up happening at that point?
Out of love, my biological father, Jesus, he wraps me up in a blanket and he walks down the mountain to Guatemala City. There, when he reaches the hospital, the doctor takes one look at me and he says, I'm sorry, sir, but you don't have enough money. And even if you did, we wouldn't know how to perform this surgery. Jesus walks out of the hospital in defeat because he knows that his daughter is going to die. And as he's sitting outside on the stairs, weeping over my life, two men came up to him and asked him, "Sir, why are you crying?" And he couldn't even speak, but he just lifted the blanket from my face, and the two men saw the deformity, and they looked at him and said, "There is hope." And they led Jesus and I to an orphanage called Casa Guatemala. Along the way, they gave Jesus some money and some food. Once we arrived at the orphanage, Jesus went to turn around to tell the two men thank you, and they were nowhere to be found. And even the owner of the orphanage, Angie, said that we came alone. And I believe that that was a divine intervention over my life.
Sure sounds like that. Tell me about being adopted, Camey.
Well, so I lived at the orphanage for 2 months, and then I had the opportunity to go to Spokane, Washington to live with a foster family while my surgeries are taking place. And being born with a cleft lip and cleft palate, the surgeries are not just one and done. It's a process. And luckily for me, the family who fostered me knew that this was going to be a long process. They fell in love with me and I along with them. They went back to Guatemala and asked my biological family if they could adopt me. And lucky for me, I was saved and had my surgeries and was adopted.
And you had so many surgeries during your young life. What was that like for you?
You know, as a child, a lot of times it was traumatic. You know, as a little baby, a lot of doctors actually spoke death over me. They told my parents, she's never going to be able to talk. She won't be able to speak. But God had a different plan. And thankfully, as I got older, I met some doctors that are associated with LEAP, and they do free medical surgeries around the world, and they spoke life into me. And because of them, I am so grateful.
And Camey, it is so hard for children who may have something different about their physical appearance, because other children will tease you about the way that you look. What was that like for you as a young girl growing up with those particular scars after all these surgeries?
Whenever I was a little girl, I didn't even know that I was different. I mean, my parents were so good and they always spoke life into me. But it was around the age of about 5 to 7 when I realized, especially from the side view of my face, that I looked very different. And most of the times kids would say, "Hey, what happened? Why do you have scars on your lip?" I would tell them and they were fine. But sometimes, they could be a little harsh, but more times, it was the adults who sometimes would give me that side look or the side eye or assume that I had a mental disability as well.
Yeah, you write in the book about one particular man who makes a comment about your physical appearance. That must have been so difficult for you.
It was, and at the time, I didn't quite know how to process it, and my little heart was so pure at the time, but it did leave a scar upon my heart. It left a wound that thankfully that I had to invite the Lord to come back into that wound and to heal, because I started to become almost afraid of people, what they thought of me. I viewed myself through the world's lens rather than through God's lens.
So Camey, tell me a little bit about becoming a Christian and how becoming a Christian and asking God to come into your life changed how you looked at these scars.
Oh, yes, I grew up, my father was a pastor, and so I grew up in the church, and at the age of 5, I realized that he was the only one that could heal my scars. And my mom always told me, she said, Camey, we are all born with a cleft in our heart. And I looked at my mom like, Mom, you're crazy. We don't have a cleft. But she just said, yes, we all have a separation in our heart, and we need the great physician to come in and to sew our heart back together.
And Camey, you really have embraced your scars. The name of your book, in fact, it talks about, beautifully scarred. So tell me a little bit about how you look at the scars, both the physical scars that you have and some of the emotional scars that come with your young life.
Yes, I have so many scars, too many to count, physical scars. I have the double scar on my lip. They actually sewed a vein from my bottom lip to my upper lip. I have scars on my hip, but it was the internal scars that were the true wounds of my heart. And it didn't happen all at once. The healing was a process, but it was whenever I went back into the files of all of the different wounds in my life. But this time I went back and I took Jesus with me, and I realized that his scars are beautiful, and that it's not about my scars, but it's about his beautiful scars that came to heal my scars, both spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, and physically.
Yeah, that's a beautiful response. Thank you for sharing that. What else have you learned about God's grace and God's healing through your life?
So much. God's grace is incredible. Healing didn't always happen at once. And I tell people with their own scars, give yourself grace. Healing doesn't happen overnight. And it's okay to be in the waiting, because he is working. Your story is beautiful and it's still being written, and that really that the wound shows, the scar shows that healing has taken place. And so don't be afraid of your scars. Show them boldly, because someone needs to hear what you've gone through, because it's going to really encourage those around you.
And Camey, one of the other things about you, in addition to being a wife and a mom of 3 boys, you also sing. So you've got a different way of being able to thank God through your voice, don't you?
I am a worshiper at heart. It is a one gift that the Lord gave me that I'm so grateful, because the doctors told me that I wouldn't be able to speak, that I wouldn't be able to sing, but God had a different plan. And it was at the age of 5 that I was actually in the back seat of the car. I was just singing, Jesus loves me, this I know. And my mom said, hey, Camey, what are you doing back there? And I said, oh, nothing, Mom. I'm just talking to the Lord. And she said, really? Well, what did the Lord tell you? And I said, Mom, the Lord told me that one day I'm going to travel around the world. I'm going to speak and I'm going to sing and I'm going to tell others that Jesus is real and that he still does miracles today.
Yeah, he is still in the miracle business, that is for sure. So in addition to writing this book, which is called Beautifully Scarred, you've also written a 5-day YouVersion devotional. I'm on YouVersion a lot. Tell me a little bit about the purpose of that devotional.
Yes, this is a 5-day companion to my memoir, Beautifully Scarred. And in it, I wanted to connect my thoughts with scripture so that people can reflect beauty in pain, courage in fear, and healing in the brokenness. That we all have a story, and so it's so important that we learn our story and what God is calling us, and that there's beauty in the ashes.
Camey, November, as you know, is National Adoption Month. What would you say to someone who is considering adoption?
Adoption was great for me. It actually saved my life. And I would just encourage anyone that is, a little bit afraid of doing this, that they're a little fearful, that fear is normal, but God's love is supernatural. And I believe that when people give their yes to the Lord without knowing the outcome, that God will meet you in the yes, and that as you take a step, he will meet you each step of the way. And being adopted is both beautiful and complicated at the same time, because you're entering into each other's stories. The adopted child has to enter into the family story and vice versa. But I just love how it's a picture of how God adopts us into his family.
The book is called Beautifully Scarred. Camey Joy is the author. It would be a terrific book for the holidays for someone in your life. Thank you so much for joining us, Camey, here on Christian Newsmakers and on WTHR+. Great to talk with you.
Thank you for having me.